to serve him, and just so sweetly redirected us and directed us and brought people along our path to help us learn things that we needed to learn and still need to learn. There's always lots more to learn. Daniel did go to be with the Lord just 2 years ago this month. So it's been 21 years of ministry together through She Is Safe. And so his loss is felt keenly, not just by me, but our staff, particularly the international team members. We have 20 people on staff, and most of them were mentored by Daniel. So, you develop such a close bond with one another in ministry. So we're still adjusting to life without Daniel, but his legacy continues. I receive emails constantly referencing something that he said in a book or at a workshop or in a class or something anyway. So that should encourage us all. We're all planting our lives here and there as God gives us opportunity, and just know that it's going to outlive you, whatever it is that God is going to have you invest yourself in as one of his wonderful children. So I read something recently, and I wish I could attribute it, but it was online and it wasn't signed. But so that the gospel brings something new and real to lost people as Christ transforms people and communities. I really love that. And that was a part of, it's almost embarrassing to say, a revelation for me, as I had a fairly traditional idea about what a missionary, in my case, a missionary wife and mother, was going to do. And the realities of the world came crashing in, and I had some tough decisions to make, and tough and unpopular, I will say. But for starters, my husband, Daniel, there we are. That photo is just taken just before we were deployed to East Africa. Daniel was to set up a base of operations for church planting ministry that partnered with indigenous initiatives. So that was kind of on our heart. We knew we wanted to do church planting with the least reach, but really honor the indigenous leaders that are there and somehow serve in partnership. And it was wonderful of Partners International to give us an assignment for which we really were not 100% prepared, but they did entrust to us good work and then supported us along the way, with their counsel. But our daughters were not quite 2 and 4 years old. They were 1 and 3 when we moved to Nairobi. And so that was a pretty big job for me, just living in a foreign country, raising our children there, being a support to Daniel. I helped with all the reports and liaison back to the headquarters. So all of the work across the continent that Partners was doing, Daniel was to give updates on how that was going as we were working to identify, Lord, who would be the African leader to take this position. That's just the philosophy of Partners International, and we embrace that fully. And but I also plug in, to my community. It was an all African community. You may have heard of one of the most infamous slums in the world is Kibera Slum, and that was our neck of the woods. So I was seeing just dire poverty and things that I did not understand, things that no one really prepared me for. They had said, of course, you're going to see diseased people. You're going to see people crawling on all fours. You're going to go downtown to pick up your mail or whatever, and you're going to see things you would not necessarily see in the U.S. And a lot of street kids, things like that. So they kind of prepared us for that. But nothing really prepared me for what I saw in the sale of girls. This was in the mid 80s. So at that time, there was no vernacular. I mean, we didn't know what to call it. Girls were basically brought from rural areas to the city. Their parents were paid for them. And the girls, probably 13, sometimes as young as 11 to 14, would do all the cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. And then my neighbor told me that part of the arrangement was that they were to, within a couple of years, identify someone to a man to marry her. So at the most, she would be 16 years old, married to someone who probably already had a wife or two. And then she was brought on to do the heavy lifting and the things that nobody else wanted to do. I had never heard of such a thing. It's not anything that my friends college were talking about. I immediately talked to some of the missionary women who had lived there for some time and said, you know what, I just learned. And they would say, well, you just need to calm down, because this is a part of the culture. It's sort of an everyday thing. It's normalized, and you're not here to change culture now, are you? You're really here to share the gospel and plant churches. So that's what you just need to take a deep breath about that. And every night when I tucked my girls into bed, it was a crisis for me. I thought, who is tucking those girls in? They are being treated like slaves, and they've been bought and sold and betrayed. And I just can't look away from that. So I went to the lead elder of our church, All African Church, and I just told them, hey, I'm new here and I'm seeing things I don't understand. Please help me know how I'm supposed to respond. And so I told him the issue before me, and he just said, Michelle, every culture has its social evils, and the mistreatment of women and girls, that's on us. He said, and I want you to know that there's some amazing Christian women in this church who are leaders, who have transcended this very context that you're talking about. I would love for you to meet them. So that was the moment when kind of the lights went on, and I realized, oh, of course, there are Christian women who have lived through this and come to Christ, and they're passionate for these women and girls to live out the beauty of being, made in his image and treated with the honor and dignity. And those are the people I want to be talking to. Those are the people I want to learn from. It also struck a chord very deeply with me, as it does with probably the majority of women and women that I ever talked to in the United States. If we did a poll, they would say they had been somehow sexually abused, assaulted at some point in their lives. And for me, I was abused and exploited by my dad, who was a pedophile from my very earliest memories, and was rescued from the home. I told a friend at school what was happening, and her mom called the school, and I was out of there in a weekend and placed with a foster family, a Christian family, that gave me a glimpse of what a family could be like if Christ lived there. And the rest is kind of history. I wish we had hours and hours. I could tell you the whole thing. But so I had become a new creation in Christ at 18 years old, and met this wonderful Christian man from a family that was missional. His parents told me, I was a brand new Christian. They said, everything that we own is not owned by us. It's owned by God, and we're his stewards, and we're very frugal with everything that he provides for us, so that we can have more to give to his work. I didn't know what any of those words meant, but I bought it. I said, I get it. Jesus gave his life to me. I'm going to give my life back, and so that everybody everywhere can have their chance to know him. And then I went about becoming a new creation, so new that I no longer identified with that hurt little girl. There were many family members who didn't even know my story. Um, People at Partners International did not know my background because I was embarrassed by it. I didn't want to talk about it. I thought I'm so over all of that. There I am, looking into the eyes of a little girl, and the light bulb has gone on that this child is suffering some of the things that I suffered. And it was like the Lord said, there was a time when you needed a rescue, and I gave you one, and you needed a new family and a new identity. Now, what are you going to do for these children of mine? I That was the moment when I knew suddenly my past made sense. It was like, oh Lord, the things that I suffered, you became my life and my comfort and my whole new life now in eternity. I guess you want to use that. I thought it was all trash, and God could never do anything with that. But He did by opening my eyes. And it's almost embarrassing to say that it was a revelation to me. Oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what's happening to my computer. It's running out of battery life. And and I have to stand on my head to try and plug it in. Forgive me for switching about.
You're good.
Uh-huh. Let's see here. Okay. Uh, anyway, all of that to say, wow, whatever it is that you have suffered, don't write it off too quickly. God may have a beautiful plan to put that to work as insight and collateral. Now, fast forward all these years later, I can look into the eyes of a little girl or woman who've been betrayed and sold and the worst things that have happened to them and say, I am getting older. And one of these days, I'm going to need a replacement. And, we're thinking we want somebody who has some real life insight, who has borne the worst and come through shining for Christ. And that might just be you. I hope so. I hope that every woman or girl who has their opportunity to come to Christ also sees that there is no trash in their background. God really wants to use all of that and in a very practical way. The evangelical missionaries that were our closest friends, we were all in that same camp. Like, we're here to share the gospel. Right. And I just kept challenging, the Lord kept challenging me. Well, that's good news, right? The good news that God cares so much that He sent His Son to die and to redeem people to Himself forever. And when one of us has come to Him and, we have a real life problem, we think He really cares. We hope that His people will really care and kind of lean in on that. That was a new concept, and it was considered a social gospel if you did anything practical. As I said, that was a long time ago. It was in the 80s. I'm happy to say that a lot has changed in that way, but almost in some cases to a whole another level of triumphalism. Like, we're here and by God's grace, we're going to stamp out human trafficking. It's just not going to happen anymore. Oh, really? We think we're going to stamp it out. We're going to end it. Well, I think Jesus was pretty clear that we live in a broken world. We're going to have a broken world. What we can do is, against the darkening backdrop, to shine more brightly for Christ. You probably maybe have heard the old hymn, Lead On, O King Eternal. It has a stanza that says, it's through deeds of love and mercy that His heavenly kingdom comes. So that's what the world is looking for and listening for. They're not listening for better arguments. They're looking to see our faith operationalized in a real way in a broken world. And wow, did I start having opportunities for that? And so will you as you go forward, no matter where in the world God has you. thankfully, so at that point, I was just talking about girls in my community. And then I learned through our friends that were directors of other areas for Partners International that there were similar issues basically among the least reach. Is it was very common and normalized to abuse and sell women and girls. And at that time, we were just sharing anecdotal stories with each other, little bits of research that we could personally do. Well, now, of course, we have the State Department, the International Labor Organization, many other organizations that dedicate themselves to researching, trying to wrap our arms around this issue of human trafficking. They say there are 40 to 50 million people enslaved today, more than any other time in history, that the majority are women and girls, over 70% of all who are trafficked or sold. Human trafficking, just at its basest definition, involves force, fraud, or coercion to use another person for sex, labor, or other things like organ removal. If you're talking about the sex slavery portion of human trafficking, the last statistic we've seen just a couple of years ago is 99% of those sold for sex are female. And many domestic laborers, like the girls I was talking about, are also exploited for sex. So that was my big revelation, is that it was pretty rampant behavior to normalize the abuse and sale of women and girls. And that there were places that we could actually identify that were worse than other places. And as this map shows, the red hot colors, and there are some countries that don't report anything. For many, many years, China reported that they had no human trafficking whatsoever. So just because it's an area that looks like it's white, it doesn't mean there's nothing happening there. It means that they're not actively reporting, so they're not colored in here. But so she is safe. If you start from West Africa and go across, we're in Mali, the Middle East, North Africa, in 3 countries there, in South Sudan, Uganda, India, Nepal, Indonesia, and Myanmar, with our wonderful staff. And it seems that the Lord, keeps the tension high on this particular topic. I have a theory that he's just kind of had it with the mistreatment of his image bearers, and he's calling his people to alarm, and to get over our fear of, that we're not sharing the gospel. We know, and she is safe, that the game changer, the number one game changer for any girl or woman who's been rescued, is to come to Christ and see herself new, her new identity in him. So the gospel, of course, is integral to everything that we do. But I'm thankful that we have the research. We can identify where these high-risk communities are, and she is safe, and our wonderful staff can really take on a part of that and focus on this particular issue, and in the right places. The right places, meaning there's an overlap between those places that are least reached with the gospel and the normalization of the sale of women and girls. So we know the sale of women and girls and men and boys happens everywhere to one degree or another. It's that highest risk, extreme risk population that She is Safe is looking for. And our, let's see, our wonderful team members, I wish I could show them all to you, because they're the ones that really make it happen. Let's see, I think my PowerPoint has gone to sleep. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So, any of you heard or seen about the movie The Sound of Freedom? Raise your hand. Sound of Freedom. She is Safe is being called every single day about that. Please come and help us as a sector expert to understand what, what is it with this movie and what are we supposed to do? If you've seen the movie, you know that it ends with the call to action is buy a ticket for somebody else, basically, to see it. And so a lot of people are left with their hearts pounding. Yes, I'll buy a ticket, but also I'd like to do something. What else can we do? So I'm really thankful that there's plenty that we can do. I wanted to mention too that some of the things that I guess they're kind of myths that I like to debunk. One is that the United States is the worst place in the world for human trafficking. That's a misquote. We're probably the #1 purveyor of pornography, which feeds into human trafficking. We are by no means the worst country in the world for human trafficking, even as a gateway corridor through our airports. Nothing that's going on here compares to places I could take you to, where this particular photo was shot inside a brothel in North India that is a legal entity. If one is 18 years old, one could be used in a brothel. You can sign a contract to work, and that's all legal if you're 18. But the average age when a girl begins in these brothels is 11 years old. And she will only survive about 7 years. She'll die of sexually transmitted disease infections or childbirth because she's really too fragile. She's still growing, and she may die in childbirth. Or the #1 killer of adolescent girls in the developing world is suicide, as they just simply can't bear it anymore. And you can see it in her eyes. And, get me out of here. In fact, every 3 seconds, a girl is given or sold to a man. Just 1, 2, 3. One more. No wonder God is not looking away and he's inviting us to lean on in. But in fact, this is a spiritual evil. The 1040 window map, that my 1040 didn't pop up on the other map, and the trafficking in persons map are almost identical. But that's because there is a connection. This is a spiritual evil that shows itself in the physical realities of women and girls who live there. One of the most jarring things that I learned as I was early on in my, research for this was about the gender ratios being skewed in India and China because of the sex selective abortion of the infant girls. And many, many families could not afford the amniocentesis to determine the sex of the child. So they would wait until she was born and she'd be starved, strangled, or buried alive. And this has left China, for instance, with whole villages of bachelors. And those bachelors want a wife, and they will pay someone to go to Myanmar or some other country nearby to particularly select an impoverished community, a displaced persons camp, for instance, and offer to buy a girl to relieve the suffering of the whole family. So for me, or Christian women, it was like, wake up. How many years are we going to study the Bible and feel like we've done our part when the women around the world are suffering the worst at the hands of the enemy? And we have the tools that can make all the difference if we're willing to speak up. Let me see. Got troubles again. I apologize. Well, of course, there is a better way. And that is for God's people to enter into these places arm in arm with local people who know the language and the culture, have the insights that can make all of the difference. And those women that we work with in the hardest places, and that is part of the answer to the question about the name of She Is Safe. I really did think it was going to be mostly appealing to women, mostly women involved. And so the sisters in service language kind of, I thought, oh, sis, that'll be memorable, whatever. But like the second year we were there, I guess the Pope was sick or something. My assistant went to make a deposit, and the nice lady at the bank leaned forward and said, "How is the Pope, dear?" She really did think that we were Catholic nuns. So we thought, oh, we didn't anticipate that. And then we were about 4 years into the ministry, and my husband joined staff as our VP, executive VP for international ministry. And he was kind of loath to give out a business card that said Sisters in Service. We had board members who were men, other men who really wanted to be involved, and we were hiring men. It was like, well, we've got to rethink this. So it took about 1.5 years to pray in a new name for She Is Safe that would retain the SIS. And so we thought, let's just talk about our goal. And that's that every at-risk girl would be safe and free to become the person that God created her to be. But in simplest terms, our way of working is to enter in as Jesus did, with an invitation to new life through him, and with healing, and with a new mindset, and with some skills that will help women to become self-sustaining. We do that by partnering with local Christian entities. It can be an indigenous denomination, the Africa Inland Church of Sudan, for instance. It's a church growth organization, all indigenous run, and they have a women's department. So we went to the bishops of AIC and said, hey, we are looking for opportunities to partner together with the church and the women of the church, local women, on this issue. Would you select some women that could help us? And so that approach, sometimes it's a pastor's wife who maybe lives near a red light district, and she has begun outreach in the brothels and spins off a little ministry of her own and has its own name and its own board and so on. So that's what we're looking for, is local partner organizations, Christian organizations or denominations, with local women who are trusted leaders in their areas, in their communities. And then with their help, we have forged some amazing programs that are alternatives to selling girls. So think of it like this. If you're in the Middle East right now, you know, that hostility is raging, you're a Christian, an Arab Christian woman, and you want to share Christ with your neighbor, and you know you got the gospel on your heart and your tongue, and you want to go there. But if you do, that's, you know, that's the end of your life here. But if you are going to your neighbor and saying, we're starting this women's group, they're She Is Safe groups. We have about 12 to 20 women in them, and we are going to pray for each other every day. We're going to help each other succeed. We are going to keep our daughters safe from being sold or forced into marriage or taken. We're going to learn ways to keep them safe. And we are going to create a saving and lending opportunity that we will all manage. All the women of the group are in charge of that. And then we will be each other's like loan officers, and we will select who should take a loan and at what amount. And probably by the end of the year, your family income will rise by about 100%. How does that sound? Well, there are very few women who will refuse that. Some will still say, oh, but you're a Christian and I can't associate with you. But for those who are willing, it creates this entrepreneurial spirit and the community of support among women. That's so very beautiful to see, even in some of the hardest places. And when it comes to the men in the community, we win by demonstration. As they see their wives gaining dignity, as they learn that and almost everywhere we work, there are laws that can help to protect women and girls that women and girls don't know about, don't know what's even available to them. I'm going to hasten a little bit here, if I can. There. I love this picture. It's actual real-time photo. It takes a lot of courage, I will admit, for our team and for the local women to basically start creating change, saying, hey, God knows we're suffering. God has given us gifts, and those should be put to work for our families and our communities, and it's going to look different. So I acknowledge there are risks, lots of risks, and it takes some courageous people to do something about it. So we identified this notorious district of Nepal in the Himalayas where every girl over the age of 13 was being sold. And so we went in with that model alongside, arm in arm with some church planter friends, and just gathered the women and said, you know, we'd like to know what's happening with your girls. We already knew what was happening, but we wanted to hear their heart on it. And the tears began to flow, and they said, yeah, our daughter, we got $50 for our daughter, and we get $50 a month as long as she lives. That was about 7 years ago. And over the course of time, working on, assessing what does this village need that this village could provide. Let's do the research on that. Let's bring along in this case, a Nepali veterinarian to help with animal husbandry. So we had kind of a Sell Goats, Not Girls campaign within the community. There were about 200 families in the community. Only about 20 of them opted into the program, but everybody else was watching. They wanted to know what was happening here. Was the family going to fare any better? Would the women become obnoxious, men haters, and what was going to happen? But it sure was nice to see their daughters were here and growing up, and some of them were getting married and having grandchildren there. I mean, it just was, everything really began to change. Now there is a school. We helped to build it. We by no means, built it or funded it, but we helped. We made sure that there's a Nepali Christian teacher there. She is safe, kind of funds that. And the word has spread throughout the village. Now about 100 new families in this last year have signed on to the program. We have hit that critical mass juncture. So when you get that many people who are saying we are no longer resorting to selling our girls, and it's illegal, we know it's illegal, and we have a hotline for help, and we have an alternative, other things that we can do to generate income. We have reduced human trafficking in this particular village by 85%. The Lord has really done it for them. But it's taken a lot of time, a lot of hard work, a lot of risk, and patience, to be humble enough to realize we don't have all of the answers, but the local people do, and especially the local Christians who are there. I'm just going to rush through this last little bit, and then we can do a bit of Q&A. So She Is Safe focuses on that in that village. That's a source community in red light districts and refugee camps. That's where women and girls are most at risk and being sold as a normal practice. And I love stories. We have been working for over 21 years with a church planter group in India. We have about 5 indigenous partner organizations in India: North, South, East, West, and Central. And so we've sensitized a lot of the church planters, or those who are being trained, Indian guys who are being trained to do church planting, and their wives. And they're doing this more holistic approach to getting into villages, gathering the leaders, looking for that person of peace, and discussing, what are the major issues, and is there a way that we can help together with that? And so we let them know one of the big indicators of the health of a village is what's happening with the girls. So just open your eyes as you go in. And we got email recently from a couple of church planters. They said they were on their way in. They were going to meet with some leaders of the village, and they became very disturbed as they walked through the village and saw the poor condition of the girls. And so that was one of the first questions they posed to the village leaders. Is there some kind of illness going around in your village? Because it looks like all these girls are sick. And the men said, you shouldn't worry about them, because it's just their job. It's what happens after they do their job for a while. And they asked, well, what's the job? And they said, well, we have them sleep with men at night, and then we get the money, and we don't grow anything. We don't make anything. This has simply been our way of taking care of our families. And we've been doing it for centuries. So you shouldn't worry about it. And the church planter said so boldly, it's time for a better way. We can show you a better way. Let us tell you about some of the other villages that we've really helped, and all their girls are healthy, and they have their grandchildren there. That's my message for us today as the church. It's time for a better way, and it does come down to entering in as Jesus did. He knew the very worst about every person that he ever encountered, the most sinful thoughts and deeds on their hearts and in their history. And yet when he encountered them, he didn't accuse them. He didn't throw stones at them. He embraced them and said, hey, let's have dinner. Let's talk about what's going on. Entering in that gentle way. You'll hear all kinds of ways that people say you ought to handle human trafficking. And I really love the Jesus way that She Is Safe has adopted. However, this is a giant, and we do need to combat the giant in our day. I think every generation has its Goliath. It begins with prayer, and then real courage, support, financial support, meaning it does take money to go anywhere, do anything, and advocacy. So this is something that so many of the world's women do not have, and that's the ability to speak up about their opinion, about what they want, about what's right or wrong, about their faith, whether they can choose to follow Christ or something else. And you and I, though, we have this opportunity, and we're so rich in that kind of opportunity. So my encouragement to you, if I only have a minute with you, it's, keep learning. You can sign up for She Is Safe updates. We do our best to keep content-rich information flowing out, and you can sign up for that on our website, and from other places too. Just if God has, strummed the chords of your heart on this in any way, keep learning about it and positioning your life to shine a light on it for others, and then speak. You can speak, of course, by writing articles and blogs and, posts of any kind, and then organize. I would dare say, because of our little time together, more than probably 80% of the people on the issue of the abuse and sale of women and girls. So organize. I'm glad to hear, Paul, that it's your birthday. October 11th is International Day of the Girl. So She Is Safe kind of owns that day. And we could make you our mascot. That would be really fun. But But I mean, that's a simple thing that y'all could do. You could kind of repost what we post out there about International Day of the Girl and why it's important to focus on girls. It really is a litmus test to the health and security and progress of a family or a community, a country, or a nation. And I have to believe that God's people ought to be on the forefront of the things that are the most egregious in the world today. So we may have just a couple of minutes. I apologize for all my glitches, but yeah, do you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to bring? I would love to hear.
I think it's just like really overwhelming that all of that stuff is happening all the time. And like, it's encouraging to hear that there are people like you going out and fighting for that and also sharing the gospel while fighting for justice. Like, I don't really have questions because I guess the only question is like, how? But you've kind of already explained that. How can we be praying for you specifically in your ministry? I guess it would be my follow-up question to that.
Thank you. Yeah, it is becoming increasingly difficult to do good in a fallen world. For the first time I've been in international missions since the 80s, and a lot of that time in India. For the first time ever, we have had to be interviewed by the Indian government both before and after one of our evaluation trips, and they wanted to see all of our pictures. They wanted to see where we were going to post them and if we had anything that reflected negatively on the Indian government. So they're getting more technologically savvy, and they're kicking Christian organizations out of the country. I think it's Save the Child or something was the most recent Christian organization that was kicked out of the country. And before that, just a couple of years ago, it was Compassion International. So India kissed billions of dollars goodbye, just like that, because it was a Christian organization. They really didn't want them sharing the gospel with children. So we're getting, it's getting more and more difficult for us to do our work. Our international team members are non-resident missionaries. So they live here in the United States and travel to and from the field of service. There's advantage to that in that the local women have the leadership and carry on the work day to day. But the downside is you have to get a visa to go in, a visitor visa or some kind of consultant's visa as we go in. So pray for those knots to come unraveled. There is such a press in the Indian government to become fully a Hindu nation and to even rename the country. There's all kinds of, pressure in that way. And I am just now canceling a trip to the Middle East. I was planning to go this month to some of our work in the refugee camps for Syrian girls mostly and women, and see our work there, encourage the troops there. But because of what happened over the weekend, we can't get there. So if we as Christians are going to focus on the hard places, we're going to have a lot of adjustments to make. We're going to have a lot of failed initiatives, right? And the Lord never said it would be easy. It takes a lot of persistence to continue and find new ways to do the work that we've been called to do. But God is in it. Thank you. Thanks for that. Oh, how are we doing for time?
Well, sadly, we're up. I don't know. I know some of these guys have other commitments and whatnot, so I will share with them your your website information there. I encourage them to follow up that way. But thank you so much, Michelle. Let me pray for you and for the work that you guys are doing, and then I will have to let these guys go.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you all. Hope to meet you in person someday.
That'd be great. Let me pray. Father, thank you that your ears are not closed, nor your eyes, that you see and you hear, and you are moved with compassion. And just as you have before, you're ready to act, and you're looking for your people to partner with, and you're looking to send us into other places, some near and some far, and some maybe harder than others, but you're looking for us to join you and bring hope and bring light into hard and dark situations. Thank you for Michelle and for her team, for so many others that are working around the world to bring hope and light. We pray for the women and girls that are being oppressed and that don't know of their own value or you and your love. And I pray that you would continue to work to bring glory to yourself and continue to let your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much.
My pleasure, really. Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks for my birthday wishes, ladies.
Thank you for everything.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us.